Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LARP Tales podcast, the podcast where we retell our adventures in live action role playing games. I'm your host, Oliver. Joining me, as always, is my wife, Robyn. And also joining us on this show is our guest, Max Berry. Max has been LARPing for a while. We talk about how Max got into LARP. We talk a bit about Empire, but Max ran a game this year called Eldritch Isle Dark Waltz, which was a cosmic horror game that Robyn and I attended as players. We did a recap of that game in our last episode. If you haven't checked that out, go check it out up here. It was good to get a perspective on the back end of LARP, the production side, what it takes to run a game, writing a game. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you're new to the Two Having to Roll universe. If you're listening on audio platforms, give us stars, just all the stars. Make sure it's all of the stars. We do have ways to support us down in the show notes and in the description of the videos as well. We have a Patreon. We have a referral code for Empire LARP if you're interested in going there. And with all that out of the way, let's get into our conversation with Max. Welcome along to the podcast, Max. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me on.
We're going to talk a bit about your LARP that you did this year, but to start off, I would like to ask you how you got into LARP and kind of how long you've been LARPing for as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So, come to think of it now, I've been probably LARPing for, scarily, it's about 8 years coming up
8
now.
years, wow, okay.
Yeah, and I probably went into it in a bit of an unconventional way. I watched the movie Role Models, and I was like, actually, you know what? That sounds like a bit of a laugh.
You got into it through Role Models.
Yeah.
You're the first person that I've heard that got into it through Role Models. That's amazing.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of media around it at the time, and like I was like, is this actually a thing? Because I've done a little bit of D&D, but I wasn't like, I grew up in sort of rural Somerset and sort of stayed there until about 8 years ago, really, and I was like, there wasn't much of a nerd scene sort of around that sort of area, and I was like, oh, this is actually looks like fun. I wonder, it might look a bit weird. It might look a bit like there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but I was like, hey, I want to give this a go. And
there's something quite purist about that, though. I got
Yeah.
something quite purist larper about that being like that. I want to do that.
Yeah, and it's only gone up from there, to be honest. Like the quality was a lot different in the UK than it is in America, as I think is kind of shown. But like in particularly that film, I was like, hey, if it's at that level, I'm happy, and everything else since then has been sort of a bonus, really.
So
you must be one of the only people who have like watched that film and gone, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. So how did where did you find the like the LARP community? Because 8 years ago, like Empire was running and all that, right?
Yeah, so Empire was my first one that I went to, and that was kind of the easiest one to find. I just went to Google LARP near me, and there's a couple ones like I think there was one in Cornwall which was pirate themed. I was like, yeah, but if you look at it, it was like I think there's like 20 to 30 people that went. I was like, that's a bit intense for me. And I was looking, I was like, Empire, well, there's a lot of people go to that one, so I could easily sort of blend into the crowd and sort of. My first event was a little bit like Louis Theroux, to be honest with you, because I didn't know what to expect, didn't really know that much. I signed up to a couple of pages, and everyone's like, "Oh, you can't wear red. That's terrible."
Oh, really?
Yeah, or like you know how some people are quite extreme on their views, especially like during the long dark kind of LARP period where they kind of go into their hibernation bunkers and build up more in sort of tense views and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, I'm looking to come along, and then like you'd have 100 replies being like, yay, or why are you even thinking about doing that and stuff like that. So I came along to my first Empire sort of bright-eyed, didn't really know what to expect. And I believe that was the Muddening event. So like the mythical Muddening event where it just rained for about 3 or 4 days beforehand. My car got stuck coming onto the field. I had sort of a paper thin tunic that was basically as soon as it got wet nearly went see-through. And yeah, the rest is history, really. The first night was a bit rough, I must admit, but as soon as I got into the battlefield side of things and sort of saw that sort of scale go
Yeah.
at it, and I was like, "Wow, this is for me." And I got hooked from then, really.
Yeah. I think
So
Empire is. Go on. Sorry, Robyn.
I was gonna say what so obviously you're in Dawn now.
Mhm.
Did you start off in Dawn?
Oh no, I was a Wintermark kid, so I think there was a big wave for people joining Wintermark at the time because that was
Yeah.
when sort of the Hat Films guys came along, I think, and started making their videos about it. I just signed up because I was watching Vikings on TV at the time, and I know it's not a Viking nation, but
It is really.
yeah,
It is.
so that's kind of what brought me onto that side of things. Let's say very fresh face coming into it, not really knowing what to expect, what to actually do when I get there.
Did you come in as a group, or did you just were you
Nope,
on your
just
own?
by myself, individual. I didn't know
Yeah.
anyone else attending. Um, Luckily, some of the first people I met, some of the first, like the people I still hang around with to this day, like they came up to me and was like, "You look new," essentially.
You look new.
Do you want to go on a bit of a pub crawl? And I was like, well, these people look weird. Sure, let's do it. And I was like, I went to the attitude of just saying yes to everything, and
Yeah.
I think that's always the best way when you get into the hobby. It's try everything you're comfortable with, and sort of go into that sort of explore side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you recommend that? Because we get a lot of people like asking us this question, like what LARP you'd recommend for like new players. And I think it can be a bit subjective, but I honestly do think that the bigger LARPs, especially Empire, is actually better for getting into the hobby than the smaller ones. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I'd say if you don't necessarily have a lot of role play experience, I'd say probably a bigger LARP is the way to go because 9 times out of 10 you could pretty much just come in as a self-insert character, which was what my first character was really. It was me with a minor characteristic kind of turned up a little bit. I didn't really
Yeah.
get into that role play that much. I kind of sort of walked around, observed the world, and sort of took that in. But I'd say if you got a little bit more, if you played sort of like D&D for a couple of years,
Mm.
or you're really into your intense role play, or even if you're a particularly good actor, maybe a smaller system might be more approachable for you as well because in those places you do get the limelight and the opportunities sort of shined on you more. So
Yeah.
if you feel comfortable in a more intense environment, yeah, I'd say probably jump into a smaller system as well, really.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it can be very,
Hmm.
very subjective. I think, like you say, if you are that type of person that, yeah, is already like, yeah, like a good actor, or like an improper or something like that, you might be a bit bored, of Empire, and you're just like, oh, where's my DM telling me to do this? But I guess it's just kind of yeah, subjective. It's funny how you saying about you look new, because I think you were one of the first people that talked to Robyn and myself like as new players, because I remember we were like, I think it was it must have been the Saturday morning, and we were just like, the
Yeah.
big battle was about to start, and Dawn was a biggish, it's bigger now, but there was a lot of people in that Dawn Square, and we were like, we don't know what to do. And you approached like Robyn, and I was just like, do you have a lance? I don't think we even knew what a lance was, right?
Yeah, you were like my first introduction to LARP battling. Because yeah, it was that morning, and I think Oliver, you were already like the Durandals said to you, "Oh, come with us, we'll give you a shield and everything." And you, Max, had come up, and I was like, I don't have a group, and you were like, "Oh, just come with us then." And I came with you guys, and yeah, with no armor on and two tiny little swords. And you were like, "Oh, just follow me, you'll be fine." And I remember you being like, "It's okay, follow me, you'll be fine. I've got this pouch, it's got all these, herbs and stuff in it." And I'm behind you, like, "What is a herb? I don't even know if I can ask at this point." And you really go through the gate, and then you just bolt off, and all I hear is someone be like, "Baldwin, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Who do I keep up with?" But it was amazing because then it hooked me because I stayed in the front line the entire time, came back, and I was like, that's the group I'm staying with. That was amazing. This is the reason I'm coming back, basically. Was yeah, just trying to keep up with you on the battlefield.
That's great to hear. I've always trying to keep up that thing. Like when I first got into the hobby, there was a lot of people that sort of, as I said, my friends came up to me and were like, "Hey, you're new, tag along." There's a couple of people in the league that randomly stumbled upon me trying to sell for something, and they were like, "We're not going to fleece them, actually." And they actually took me a tour of the whole of Empire. So I'm trying to sort of make sure if you do see someone new to the hobby or someone newish or someone looking a bit lost, especially in those sort of more intense environments, I think it's always good to sort of reach out and sort of, I think what's it called, the sort of like uplifting in LARP. I don't, it sounds a bit intense of a word for me, but I'd say like
Yeah.
always offer like a helping
Yeah.
hand or try to bring someone along the adventure because it's always more
Yeah.
fun with more people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
No,
It's
exactly.
yeah. I find it difficult to tell now though, because people.
Mm.
I don't know if you find that people are such strong larpers just coming in. Like sometimes you'll be like you'll be in a full RP situation with them, and then they'll be like, oh, I'm actually new to Anvil. And you're like, wait, are you? It's like, oh, okay.
No, I definitely feel that. There's a chap called Eldon. I'm not sure if you know Eldon. He plays Percy in Empire of House Summerstrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was a very similar situation. He
Mm.
hit his first event on Friday at 6 o'clock. He came along onto a skirmish that I was on, and he was in the queue. And I couldn't tell at the time. And I still to this day I don't know. I've asked him, and he says like he can't really remember. But he looked really, really worried because there's someone going up was like, "You're fighting the Druid. You're probably going to die. This and this." And he had this fear in his eyes. And to this day, again, his first ever time at an event. 10 minutes into the event, he's being told his character's going to die. And I'm like, hey, are you okay? This is going to be quite intense.
Yeah.
And he looked terrified. I still can't tell if he was role playing or if it's just because he was new.
That's the thing, but you get swept up in it. I gotta
No,
admit,
yeah.
because I remember that moment that Robin was describing. Because I like I said, because we went, oh well, we'd both been asked. We were like, why don't we just both join different lances? We'll get a different like view on the battlefield. And it was crazy because we'd never really experienced it at all. And I remember we came through like it was a hot gate because I remember it vividly because it was the first one. So we came through. It was a hot gate against the Druge, and it would have been like the first battle back from like COVID as well for a lot of people. Yeah, and I remember just Baldwin just going off because you went off to the right and you just went for it and just shot off, and then like little Robin Araz Aranel just like followed you and you just disappeared, and I was like, oh, okay, they're gone. But that was really cool because I was like, I guess this is how we do it, and everyone was just getting really stuck in.
Yeah, I think at that time as well, I had the luxury that many people didn't. Like most people coming back from COVID, that was their first LARP back experience, stuff like that.
Mm.
But I've been playing a lot of smaller systems around sort of the Eversley area and stuff like that, and so I had tons of combat experience like over the lockdown. So my confidence was through the roof. So I just remember going off at those sort of battles back from COVID and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like those battles at Empire. But so when did you like start doing the smaller LARPs at like Eversley and that?
I think it was just before COVID. I think I went to Empire for about 2.5 years,
Yeah.
and then some people had sort of tangentially mentioned that Eversley kind of existed, and sort of I think they went to the first ever flying lead and like, oh my god, this is amazing, blah blah blah
Mm.
blah blah blah. So I went to the second one. Um, Again, as I sort of mentioned on the story before you start recording, like I just got hooked, like because a big LARP is easy to sort of get swept away with and like follow the crowd and plot gets kind of not necessarily delivered individually. You kind of have to find it and seek it out.
I guess very
Whereas
diluted, yeah.
I describe sort of a more smaller sort of LARP systems as more like Westworld. If you've ever seen sort of the movie or the
Mm.
TV show, that you sort
Yeah.
of you're walking through and then someone's like, "Oh, Timmy's fallen down the well. Who can help? You look like you know how to deal with wells." So that's what really sort of brought me in. So rather than sort of being a face in a crowd, it very much kind of brought forward like a hero character, really. But like, you're going into maybe a much smaller sort of world, but in this world, you have a much bigger impact on the outcome of what happens.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's like like they do a lot of I'm assuming because I've not been to the Flying Lead. So Flying Lead's like a is the Western cowboy one, right?
yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's like most of the games. It's all like cinematic combat and things like that, right?
Yeah, so you strip it away at the rules. It's very rules light. It's for its benefits or its sins, depending on how you like to play. If you can do it, you can do it essentially.
Hmm.
So you come into this western town. I never touched a blank firing gun before, so I'm just like, yeah, I'm new. I'm some. They have a class called a greenhorn, which is someone coming new to the west and sort of exploring. So I'm like, yeah, this
Mhm.
is this is where I'd fit in. And I'm like holding this gun, like I don't know what I'm doing with this. This is all new to me. And then you got some people that have been to other sort of systems or a little bit more confident in that sort of role playing. It's like, I'll just stick with me,
Hmm.
kid. I'll show you how it's done and stuff like that. And you know, what was that? That's probably about 6 years ago of role play through that.
Wow.
The game is now over,
Yeah.
and my character kind of had such a big arc and sort of growing from sort of confidence from being this novice bounty hunter to being like in this posse of people that would go out and chase that down the hardest things and please accept like the toughest challenges there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, as I grew in skill, so did the character, and it was a cool sort of realm to explore, really.
Yeah, yeah. What about, so I'm assuming, I mean, obviously you played a load of other games other than Flying Lead at Eversley. So what then led you into like, I'm assuming you went crewing. I'm trying to make a little trail into how you got into running a game, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm assuming you jumped from like player to crew at Eversley, right?
Yeah, so I didn't really understand the concept of crewing. I just knew
Mm.
there's a bunch of people that sort of hang around at the back and did stuff, but that was it to me, right? I
That's
didn't
us.
even know that
We're
was
almost at that stage, to be
yeah.
honest, as well. We're just
I
like,
I didn't I didn't know I didn't know how the sausage worked essentially, right?
yeah,
Or was made. So um until I was chatting again, one of my friends sort of was like, "Hey, you don't have to pay." I was like, "Well, that's cool. You get fed
Yeah.
and you get to explore a lot of different roles and different avenues and different types of role play." I'm like, actually, that sounds fun. So I didn't want to do that with lead because I was kind of in love with lead at the time. But I pretty much did it for nearly every one of their systems in the years of COVID.
oh,
So like
really, yeah,
as COVID went through, I think as the lockdowns released, obviously put on a lot of their games, and I think they had 11 games back to back, and I crewed 11 games back to back in sort of one stint, essentially.
Jeez, oh.
Um, yeah, and yeah, that was a bit of a trial by fire. I think I broke my body many times during that experience, but
Oh,
it
man.
kind of really gets you into it and sort of how to understand one how crew members interact essentially, how games are run, why games are done in certain ways, and like what sort of approaches are to things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have big respect for like the crew at those Eversley games, because obviously you're putting on like a show for us the players, but the amount of like running around and fighting the crew does that. So the few games that we've been to, like especially like what was the ones we went to,
Uh,
the first Game of Thrones one we did,
yeah.
and Asphodel one, like it was constant fighting from the crew, and obviously you're just because there's not hundreds of you, so you're constantly respawning. I'm
It,
just
it was
like,
that Asphodel one when we were
Mhm.
getting like to the final battle, and I'm like, the crew must be knackered at this point. They have just been coming at us again and again and again. And I'm like, how are they actually doing this?
Yeah, I think there's like a certain level of like you want to deliver that experience to people, right? You want to do that. There's also that sort of adrenaline that sort of rushes through when you're doing a good job at it. Like to me, I think fate losing in LARP tends to be better than winning, in my opinion. Like you tend to have better stories and stuff like that. So I think that carries across into my sort of crew experience, where 9 times out of 10 the crew tend to lose. So give that sort of dramatic role play, give that experience, go at that, share all your energy, and like the players will really sort of appreciate it.
do you think I'd like your insight on this, right? So do you think it gives you actually more of a like that experience you get in TTRPGs and D&D, and that where there's not really, you don't really win. Like, 'cause I feel like at Empire, when I know there's D&D's rules heavy, but especially with something like Empire, where there's lots of resources, and you have a lot of mechanics in combat and things like that. It can be a little bit of a win or lose type
Mhm.
thing, and yeah, there is really good storytelling at Empire, and it's all about the storytelling. But I find it Eversley, I find it a little bit more like a D&D game, where it's just like, oh, I can't really win or lose. I'm just making a good story. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, there's elements of that. I personally feel like there's probably two kinds of. It sounds to group people up. I say there's probably two kinds of role players. There's definitely, I'd say, role players that probably like to have that win, like for their characters. I think that is a focus for some people. There are people who are like, cool, this is the strategy, this is how we're playing to win, and that's totally fine and sort of acceptable to play. That's a play style that some people like. And I'd say there's probably some more people that are more sort of story driven. Like, obviously, they'd still like their characters to win at stuff, but I think they're in it a little bit more for that sort of emotional story and that sort of experience, right? Um, to play a role, I guess, would be to sort of summarize that side up, right? But you also need to think of it from a game side as well. So some people there are like, cool, I want to win, I want to survive. They have their own win conditions in their head and sort of aim to have that, right? So I think that's kind of what I've probably observed in my 8 years of role playing is like it's kind of splits into those camps. Sometimes those camps can be very at odds at each other as well. But I don't think there is a right or wrong answer of how you want to approach a game. It's more just sort of personal preference, right?
Yeah, I think as well. Like it just the games offer different things. Like Empire offers different things from some of the Eversley games. It's good that we've branched out to doing those Eversley games. 'Cause it scratches that itch on the other side as well. So anyway, how when did you decide that you wanted to run your own run your own LARP?
I'm not quite sure to be honest, because I think I went to a few games, and it's no fault of sort of the games and how they were run, but I actually was like, there's a couple of missed opportunities there, right? And there was a couple of things that I was like, you know, they had sort of either sort of expressly expedited things, or I think they made assumptions of what the players wanted, which were different to how the players wanted to do things. So I think my experience in, professionally, I actually make computer games for a living. So I think I am a little bit extra critical because of that. And I think that kind of pushed me to go, hey, look, if you're going to be critical about these things, put your money where your mouth is and, give it a go. So I had this kind of idea for a while that I wanted to do a horror experience because to me, emotions are something that makes role playing good. If you ever have a good role playing moment, it's not because you won a debate 9 times out of 10. It's that feeling of winning a debate. It's that feeling of, I know it sounds weird, but losing someone in the game, like getting those sort of like real emotions from a fake situation, I have always found to be the most rewarding thing. And people tend to tell you similar things. No one starts a story with, I've got 4 extra coins in my pouch because of a different trade. They tend to be like, oh, I was running here and someone got murdered and this happened and I was terrified, or I did this and my partner's character died, and or X, Y, and Z. So I really wanted to sort of marry those 2 points together and sort of be like, hey, look, I want to get a game that sort of gets people into that sort of immersion to give them sort of that sort of emotional capacity to sort of tell the stories of what they experience. So those two together, I was like, cool, I want to run a horror. So from making game side of things, like in computer games terms, I've worked on horror projects before. I worked on a number of games from a studio called Supermassive Games. They were known for Until Dawn. I made a couple of their sort of sequel titles. I was like, let's learn of like how you build up tension on horror from there, and let's see if I can turn the digital world into a more physical one and sort of bring that experience across.
Yeah, I mean, so you went obviously you went for the like the Eldritch Call of Cthulhu style thing. Had you done had you done a LARP in that kind of setting before, or?
So I did like when it came to my mind, we just done it was Oasis, which was a 1920s one run at Eversley. So the idea of that one was that there's a film crew going to an island, and then things go wrong. The game in particular, that Oasis that we played was like if we turned it into a computer game terms, it very much turned into Among Us the lot. There was basically 8 champions on the island who chose a hero, and it turned into sort of the last person standing, which was a cool LARP. I think it just wasn't as what was advertised to a few people that attended. Like no one knew that it would be a PvP LARP that way, and there was a lot of people that wasn't prepared. And like I feel like again, like it kind of brought in that sort of win state to people. Like they're like, I want to be the last person on the island over role playing to that last person on the island thing. So that's what was like, maybe that was a bit of a, I would say a missed opportunity, because I think a lot of people like it. And I look back on that game with fond memories as well. That was actually one of my favorite characters I played, was playing in that game. But that's what kind of sort of like, 1920s, and I was like, oh, like I think at the time as well, Eversley just received like a batch of robes in their costume store, and that was two of that together was like literally was like that's I've always got a passion for that sort of eldritch horror side of things and that sort of cosmic horror from
Yeah.
watching movies and sort of Doctor Who and stuff like that. So I was like, cool, this maybe has some legs. And I sort of floated the idea of a bunch of people, and they were like, oh yeah, sign me up. And that was probably about 3 years before I even pitched it to sort of
Really?
Johnny and Kitty, right?
Yeah, yeah. What's the process of like? No, you don't need to go to the absolute nitty gritty of the process of doing it. But I mean, if you go right, I want to run a LARP, so you obviously you get the site from like Johnny and Kitty and that. But I'm assuming did you do all the writing and all the rules and the concept yourself, or did you go right? I've got this concept. Can people come and help me do the writing and whatnot?
Yeah, so from sort of the basis, like there's many different sort of ways to go into it. I think, in the future, if I was to run a bigger sort of style system, there's probably a different way of going into it. But
Mm,
at Feast Your Eyes, which is where Johnny and Kitty sort of run and organize, they had a pitching process at the time. Luckily, again, my experience in games, I've written a number of pitching decks of titles myself before in the past. So I was like,
mm,
I think it was their last day of submission, and they didn't really tell. It wasn't really like majorly advertised that this was going through, and I just hastily wrote down, da 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 da, and I was like, one of the key things that I did at the time was sort of focus it from a player's perspective. What do I want a player to get out of it, rather than being like, I want to run a 1920s game in the horror expert. It's like, as a player, you experience X, Y, and Z. This is what the player will get out of it. And I had a very nice message from them by like, yes, please, yes, let's get you on it. So that was kind of sort of that initial stage. It was kind of, I think it was just about 2 paragraphs of a pitching
mm,
document. Then was when I sort of went in and went, cool, let's do the rules. So you know, different sort of people might have different sort of stages where they bring additional people on the project, but I wanted to be sort of at least set the sort of the core rule set and sort of get feedback rather than
yeah.
sort of just do a
Yeah.
design by committee. So yeah, I went through that sort of what we do sort of traditionally and sort of again computer game side of things is we build these things called core pillars. So um, my core pillars for the game were like I want to be players as immersed as possible. I want players to experience that true horror, and I want players to have a mystery to solve. So those are my sort of 3 core pillars. And every design decision you make later on sort of should reflect and enforce those pillars. And if you have sort of differentiating opinions on something, you can sort of refer to those pillars and say which one enhances the experience more. So, it didn't make sense for me to include a lot of tedious rules, of like sort of nebulous rules to go into it, because that sort of breaks people out their immersion. I'd rather have someone sort of pull the trigger on a blank firing gun to kill someone than go, you need to take 6 damage shots. On
Yeah.
reflection, I probably still had too many systems in is what that I wanted, but like, uh, you know, that's all sort of a bit of a learning experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't feel coming from. This is probably why we
Mm,
quite like Robyn and I quite like the Eversley systems where you strip rat rules, because I struggle I struggle to keep it all in my head. You know
mm,
what I mean? Because I struggle to be immersed if I've got too much, like if I've got too many rules in my head to be like, oh, we have to do this. I mean, like that's usually how I play even like D&D and things like that. If I'm a player anyway, not if I'm a DM, but if I'm a player, I will sometimes forget that we have to roll dice because we'll just be chatting and role playing and we're in the middle of something. I'm like, oh, I can do a
mm,
check. I don't know about you, Robyn. I didn't feel there was too much to be like, oh yeah, I'm getting confused. I think the only thing that I didn't bother keeping too much track of was the shots that you gave us.
mm,
Because literally, because someone, I didn't have a lot as a socialite, but someone just came and gave me like a
mm.
load of them, and I'm like, well, I can't reload them quick enough to use all of them, so I'm not going to worry about how many shots I have anyway. So,
Yeah, like I didn't feel like it was too much to keep track of. For me, the only thing that I kind of was like was with the marbles, because I was like trying to keep the number in my head as something like really spooky was happening. I was like, they're gone. They're gone. At this
Yeah.
point, they're gone. And I realized a lot of people were doing that. Instead of being like, okay, there goes the one marble, there goes another marble. It was easier to be like, well, that was terrifying. there they go. All the marbles are gone. I'm now like completely losing my mind at this point. So that was really cool. Like I really like that sort of side of it. And then the get off maze. I didn't have to keep track of those because I only had 3 of them. Those went fast. So I liked all the parts that you brought into that game. My favorite thing that you brought into it though, that I remembered really well was the I compel you. That was just my favorite thing ever that you brought into that. So is that something that you like came up with? Did you see that in another LARP system or?
So I've been trying to like essentially from I did my pitch, I have somewhere in this room, I have a notepad that has all the notes from all the LARPs that I've been to, and I wrote down sort of pros and negatives to each one because you kind of have to sort of study it as an art form really of when you're sort of going through and sort of building it. And there's a number of games that I had went to, crewed, participated in, where you're waiting on people to make a decision, right? And I know it sounds counterproductive, but what you end up having is you'll have sort of 20 people ready to go and sort of 2 people doing their shoelaces or 2 people being like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Or you might have people trying to sort of game the system a bit. So, like, I know it's a horror game, so I'm not going to go into that cave. And it's like, well, reality, like, I can understand the steps, but what you're doing there is you're kind of playing LARP like you're playing golf, where your option is to win, so you do the least amount of LARPing.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of a way to sort of come around that. I had to be very careful at the time because there's a bit of a stigma at the moment in the LARP scene about having sort of hypno powers, right? And it isn't a hypno power. It was kind of more of a strongly recommendation. Like if you have OC concerns or there was something that would be an issue, by all means, step back. It's a game. No one's going to complain, right? But it was kind of a way to strongly suggest to people that hey, something cool's going to happen if you do this. You just have to trust us because we're going to guide you to those sort of nuggets of treasure in that LARP. And this is how we sort of kind of put the boot up the players a little bit and give them sort of a more forceful direction, right?
I think it was completely genius because, like you say, it's even in the role playing space. Like Curse of Strahd is like the most popular 5th edition book, but then you've got like Strahd, who has this like can mind control people, and players don't like being mind controlled. You know, I mean, they don't like anything that takes agency, and I think a lot of people that play role playing games are very like no, like, and we don't even bother. You know, I mean, I think a lot of people don't even bother using that ability of Strahd, and there's a lot of games that just don't have any like empires like completely just black and white on it. They're just like, oh, nothing, like even your like traumatic wounds or whatever. It says, oh, it does not take agency away at all. But I think the way you did it is genius because I will admit there are you especially on the smaller LARPs, try like, and you can almost tell that the crew are like, what, like we need the players to be doing this, and they're not really doing this. We need to get them where they need to be. Like you can't, but how we kind of have to wait until they just do it, you know. But the way
Yeah.
you did it, you were like the I compel you thing would just let you people just went, all right, cool, and you managed to get them. Did it work as well as it seemed to from our end in that way?
Yeah, I think it worked perfectly. Like
Mm.
there wasn't a situation where anyone was kind of worried or concerned about what sort of came up. Like some of the things like when I was looking at other LARP systems is that in this past year there's been a lot of sort of more military-esque systems. So you have like games like Forlorn Hope or some of the Game of Thrones ones that you went to, whereas people can pull rank on you and then that feels immersive. But what do you do with a bunch of millionaires that go to an island, right? You can't really pull rank and get them to do what they want to do. So yeah, I thought it was just a nice creative way that sort of keeps in that sort of Cthulhu mythos kind of environment. There's a lot of mind stuff that happens in there. So I thought, we're not breaking the boundaries on that sort of thing, like things there, and it's very much sort of keeps to that timing because that's one thing that I've seen break a lot of LARPs is that
Yeah.
you know you can plan for the best LARP in the world, but the players are going to do something that's going to mess that up.
Yep.
And I think that's great. You don't want a railroad system. You want players to break your toys, essentially, right? You're going to build this tower of toys. They're going to knock it down instantly. This is just a way to sort of make sure that stuff was always happening, that it didn't feel too long between encounters because we've had to cancel one midway through and keep stuff going. We can sort of keep things on pace. We can keep that
Yeah.
up. But I think that really helped my crew out as well in terms of their pacing, because they knew they're not going to be going down to the bottom of a hill and waiting for 30 minutes in the cold in the middle of the night for something to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
As soon as they're ready, the players will be ready and they'll be coming out as well.
Yeah. That
It
just
was
seemed to
also
make
really
sense to me.
good. Yeah, like it was also really good. I've been in situations in LARP before where I've been a little bit like, oh, I think there's something happening over there. Am I allowed to go over there? Is that okay? What should I do currently? Having that sort of system in place, it basically just brought us all straight into really cool role play situations. And it was exciting. Like the first time, like when I was standing there and somebody walked past, I can't remember which crew member it was now. One of the crew members walked past and like whispered into my ear and just went, I compel you to go over to that hut. And I was like, I've been compelled. I mean, I'm just going to walk over to that hut now. And it was really exciting and like not knowing what was going to happen next.
Well, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think there was two things about the I compel you thing that was really good. But one was that it made things really kind of dynamic in the way that you'd be in the middle of doing one thing, and then you get compelled to go and do something else. So obviously, in like my little storyline with like Robin's character, they were trying to get off the island. There was the whole like we were all planning to get off together, and then I was compelled to go off to do somewhere else, and it just kept adding like another ripple to something. And then I think there was at some point where everyone was losing their marbles quite early on the Saturday, and there was
Oh,
a
those
few
were
people.
gone so quickly.
I know the marbles were going so quickly, so I had totally lost it. Like I don't know, it must have been early afternoon, probably even midday on Saturday. And I think Johnny was like an NPC came and compelled me to go, and I got like a load of hypnosis, and then I was back to normal, and it totally just switched up the pacing of what I was doing, in that moment. And then the second really amazing thing that you did in the LARP, which I kept telling everyone about, is that you managed to put a cutscene in a LARP. And it was so
That was
cool
outstanding.
because
Yeah.
you used the whole I compel you to compel everybody to go down to one place, and then it's like it's over when you see the flashing lights. So we all just got to stand there and witness something that was like integral to the story, because it was obviously the sacrifice and all that.
Yeah.
And it would, but yeah, is that how you kind of thought of? Were you like, I need everybody to see this bit, or was it just like, oh, I think it'd be really cool just to have a cutscene?
It was like, so this bad boy here kind of led that sort of direction a little bit, because we needed to sort of, the whole game was based on sort of a 3-act structure, and that was kind of introduction to the third act. So I was trying to think of ways for months and months and months to sort of bring that down. I was like, well, if 10 out of the 40 people see it, that'll still be good. And I was like, well, not really. And I've been to a few LARPs where they have kind of put cutscenes in, like there's one LARP that I won't name. They got everyone to kneel down, close their eyes as someone gave it like an audio description. I'm like trying to think about what's going to affect the flow and what's going to be like a reward. So it did affect the flow and sort of ruined that element of immersion a little bit, like I must admit. But I think the payoff was worthwhile. It brought everyone into sort of the same pace. It sort of showed one of the coolest things we did that weekend. It then sort of instantly dropped people into that sort of horror environment, because again, if you sort of look at the mythos of Cthulhu, that kind of thing would happen. Like there would be a call out, and then you would just wake up and see horror in front of you, right? And
Yeah.
I thought that was the easiest way to sort of get that across. So, there was concern, would that ruin people's immersions? Would that ruin the pacing of the game? But if anything, I think the proof's been a little bit in the pudding, and it's shown it worked. I'm
Oh,
happy for people to tell me that's not the case, but I've not heard that feedback yet from it.
it definitely worked with, like you say, it worked within the genre 100%. Because, and again, the players kind of know what's going on, because I think we even turned to each other being like, oh cool, we're getting a cutscene type of thing. But it was like like it's interesting you saying that it was like you had an act structure, because yeah, it felt like a very definite, okay, now this is happening, because it switched up, because we were all just like hanging out in the town, weren't we? And then taking us away from the town in the dark, and then going, okay, bang, things have literally just changed astronomically now, and also we're being attacked. And in character and out of character, we know that, oh crap, we're all miles away from, like, we all have to run back. We're so far away. It was 100% worth any kind of like taking taking you out of what you were doing up at the town.
Also, with a game like that, with such strong horror themes and elements happening, it was quite nice just to have that little break there as we're walking down, where most of us kind of went out of character and chatted for a bit. I think it allowed quite a lot of people just kind of like reset a little bit, because I can't speak for everyone, but I know that we definitely took a few breaks away to the out of character area just to have 5 minutes, just to be like, right, okay, everything's cool, right, excellent, let's get back to it. It allowed everyone to have that break as we were walking there, and then get back into it again, which I thought was quite cool, especially in that horror theme.
Yeah,
um
I think it worked out well as well. Like I would say earlier on Saturday, you kind of sort of flagged up to it. Like the pacing was a little bit intense, and it was a bit more intense than I sort of anticipated. Elements of getting Johnny to do compelled to do some sort of work there was definitely us patching some cracks.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
yeah, because I think there was people passing out tea that made you,
oh,
but I
the
mean,
tea was
yeah.
great.
at least you had something there,
Mm,
in place to be like, that was a good thing about your insanity
mhm.
system, is that you had the tiers that could be like, you could go forward or backwards with the tiers, right? So
Yeah. Well, that was as don't tell anyone. But that was made up on the fly, very much because I didn't expect people. Like, I think the first person to hit tier 3 was on Friday night. Someone on Friday night had been so
really,
terrified that they lost all their marbles.
wait, what?
Um,
What happened
so,
Friday night? Was there any counters Friday night?
so we had a couple. We did actually have a fair
Oh,
few
did you?
in the
Yeah.
woods. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we had a couple that
Mhm.
dotted throughout the Friday
Mm,
night because I wanted to make sure that it was a bit like Chinese whispers. So we'd only send sort of like
mm.
one person out to the woods by themselves, and then something would happen, and I'd be like, "I saw a giant fish man in the woods," and someone, like everyone else, was like, "No, you didn't. Stop being crazy."
Ah,
There's some weird cursed pictures of a bunch of guys that we got in sort of morph suits that went literally pitch black morph suits that were just making noises and stuff like. So someone definitely got terrified enough to lose all their marbles. So I think it was about 12 o'clock that lunch was just getting ready, and I heard a bunch of gunfire come into the town, and it was that kind of that meme where you go into and the room's on fire. So I was like, cool, let's quickly, what can I do? Someone's found this leaf. Oh, if and it was like, oh, I've just tried making a tea. What does it do? I'm like, perfect timing. This does this. And then I'm like, Johnny, you've got 5 minutes. Go in, and because I think we really had two psychologists, and we
yeah,
definitely needed more, which
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah. That
It was,
was
oh, those artifacts.
Mhm.
Oh my
yeah, that's
gosh.
what got me, was the
We
artifacts.
made this joke afterwards, like when in the car on the way home, we're making this joke, and I was like, yeah, that artifact person wasn't even part of the game. They just showed up, like Max had no idea they were, because it just went insane so quickly with these artifacts, and we all got them. Like we got them really early because we went and bought them.
Oh
We're
yeah,
like, we want
because
these.
obviously, like, my character was just like, oh, I'm just gonna buy. I was just like, what's the oldest artifact? Because I had loads of money. I was just like, I started bidding with someone. I was just like, here, all the money, the artifact, and then that just sent me into a spiral of like, this one was affecting me, and then, and then I pick up another one, and that one was affecting me. And yeah, it was so good, but it was it devolved me very quickly.
Yeah, the behind the scenes is that some of the artifacts that are supposed to be much later in the game got
Mm,
handed out much earlier in the game because I was sorting something else out, and someone just went, "I need 3 artifacts. I'll take these 3." um, so that was quite intense a little bit early on,
yeah.
to be honest. So again, a lesson learned there, but I don't think it really led to much negativity in the game. It just meant
Oh no, it was
that
brilliant.
Well,
I
story
think.
wise, it made sense. So, like, for me, yeah, because early we hadn't really seen, like, again, the majority of the group hadn't seen anything, right, and we're still a lot of us in denial. So it gave great foreshadowing that early for people who were denying things, like my character, just like thinking everyone's a fish person and start shooting people. So it was good for, because otherwise I don't think it would have had the same effect if it was happening like Saturday night or Sunday.
Yeah.
It was I don't know, Oliver, if you've told Max what happened to you with the 2 artifacts, because like he had an artifact that essentially made him forget things, and as it got more intense, he like forgot who he was and everything else, and we
Yes.
got this artifact off of him. But then what happened?
Oh yeah, so I bought the, so it was the artifact that made you slowly made you forgetful. And then it said something like, when you put this down, you feel like you've lost something for about an hour, right? So I was like, I had this artifact, and I was again, the researchers were desperately trying to get off me, and I was like, no, I bought it, it's fine. But then I obviously started forgetting things, and I started forgetting, but like no one was like picking up, even though I just like had it in my hand a lot of the time. Some people actually like took it off me, read the thing, and gave it back to me. I'm like, all right, okay, gave it back to me. And they're like, oh, cool. So I keep forgetting something to the point where I'm like, right, I've completely lost where I am, what I'm doing. And so like Robyn's character manages to get it off me, and a couple of others manage to get it off me. And I'm like, oh, and obviously it says when you put it down, you feel like you've lost something. So I'm there worrying about, I've lost something, and then you're basically your devil NPC. It's just like, I was like, I feel like I've lost something. He's like, oh, you did so. You dropped this and gave me like an even worse. Gave me the one, and I read it, and it was like everyone around you is a fish monster, and they're trying to kill you. And it said as soon as you put it down. So I'm like holding this, and then Robyn's character comes up to me and has just been like in an encounter, and is like, "Oh, Colt, you need to come. I've experienced this. You need to come with me." And I'm like looking at it, and out of character, I'm looking at it, I'm like, as soon as I put this down, everything's gonna go to shit. And I'm like, okay. And I get my gun out, and I'm like, no, fish people. So yeah, that was like Saturday morning, I think.
It was like quite early in the Saturday. He's like
Yeah.
lying in the hospital, and they're like, "We're here to help you." No, you're not. You're a fish. Oh my gosh. I think no, the artifacts really did just it got to a point where there was some people that got a little bit like smart to it, and they're like, I'm not touching anything. But it was the researchers that all properly lost their marbles really fast with it. At one point, both our psychiatrists went out, came back, they lost their mind, so we had no one to help, and it was just it was intense. But I did like that sort of like, because I've never actually picked up something that gives you like you get it subtly at like Empire, where you've got like role play effects and stuff. Never done something that is that intense before, and trying to role play that out was really cool.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that it was enough sort of like prompts to get people into the role play. Like, I struggle, especially when it's like a one shot or shorter event, to sort of like get into character. So the more prompts that you can do, the more stuff that you can get people to like essentially have, not necessarily forced upon them, but sort of ideas that they could do. I think that's where the sort of magic happens on that sort of side of things, and that's why the artifacts I think work quite well on that aspect of it.
Yeah, I really like the prompts. I work well. I think they're also. I mean, like, because Empire recently have been doing lots of like in Dawn, they've done like, curse in a bag. Come and line up and just get a curse. And people just line up and get cursed, But literally, it's because it's a prompt. Because it's just like, oh, this fun thing happens that you can role play out. I gotta admit, I do like them, because I'm a bit like you, Max. I'm like, I think some role players really get into. I think they very much rely on like backstory, especially when it's like like an historical LARP. They love to come in and be like, right, I'm instantly going to use like the history of the setting to come in and role play off that. Like, oh yeah, what do you think of this? And this is how I feel because I'm from this area, blah blah blah. Whereas I'm very much like, I struggle to remember all that for a start.
Mhm.
I'm terrible with like character backstories anyway, because I just don't have any passion for the backstories. But I like to, because I like to make shit up in the moment as well, and I feel like prompts allow me to do that and create the story right there.
Yeah, I say that's what we're all here for. Like, if everyone wanted just backstories, I'm happy to write it for them if they want to pay a lot of money for that. But I think you're there to play a role. You're there to role play. You're there to get into it and to sort of get the most out of it. And I think the more prompts that you can give people, the more helpful that can be. And it's like I wouldn't say it's like a crutch to role play, but it's definitely like an assistance to get into that character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you decide on the talking about like backstories? Because
Mm-hmm.
you did like an amalgamation of like create your character, but then we'll incorporate into the story elements. Like how did you come on that onto that? Because I know because so many LARPs do it differently. So many LARPs will be like just create your character, full stop, and then you have like a class system, and then other LARPs are just like here's a full character with all their backstory, and they interact with this person in particular. How did you land on what you came up with in the end?
So again, it kind of goes down to that sort of like that studying of other LARPs, right? So I got quite lucky in my timing because it was just when the Game of Thrones one came out. They had made a bunch of backstories for characters. Um, I had heard positive and negative feedback to them, so I sort of tried to take that on board. So like the positive feedback was great. It's that sort of prompt to get into. I know what character I'm playing. I know how to get into that character. I can think about that before I get in, and it's not kind of suddenly thrusted upon me. Some people found that a little bit too restricting as well, and they didn't think they had enough time to sort of get rewrites or had that sort of confidence to get that across. The other angle I kind of approached it with is that I'd been to a number of the Eversley Nightmare games beforehand,
Okay.
Yeah.
and those games had that type of LARPer that likes to win again. And so they'll be like, "Oh, we're going to the vampire game," and someone's like, "Well, in my backstory, I'm a vampire slayer." It's like, hmm, you know, and they just like rock up, not tell any of the event organizers, and just have the thing done, ready to tick the box, essentially. So it was kind of a one way to sort of prevent that, another way to sort of, um, you know, bring that sort of prop in and stuff like that, and prompt to help those players get into it. But the last side of the thing is that we tried to heavily tie characters into the sort of the game environment and sort of make sure that there was something. It wouldn't 100% be for every character, and some characters definitely had sort of stronger ties to the game. Just that's the nature of the beast. You have sort of 55 players. You can't make everyone have their sort of one moment in the sun.
Yeah.
But there was enough in there to be like, cool, we can sort of tie sort of individual characters together, or we can sort of connect characters to events that are going to happen throughout the game.
Yeah, because Robin's well, so yeah, Robin, your character was like obviously must have been coincidentally like like a big part of one of the plots, right?
Just the only accent I can do, so I went for it. I just didn't realize how much it was going to affect it. So I made my character was Russian. Just thought she's just going to be from Russia, and didn't really think too much more on it really. And then you gave me this incredible backstory.
Yeah, you don't know
Yeah.
how happy I was when like that character sheet came in and it aligned so well. So in particular, I picked the time period where there was a lot of sort of turmoil within it. So, and it just so happened that the Soviet Union had kind of formed 2 years prior. There was that big revolution in Russia that you just kind of dropped your character into the middle of, really. And I was like, cool, this is such a good prompt for me to sort of build on. And like there was other people that kind of had similar things. Like there was someone that wanted to be, I think, quite tied to like the stock market. It's like, well, the stock market crash had just happened, and like all that, like it was just such a good time period to pull sort of a lot of character inspiration
Oh
from,
man.
really. The Soviets, like the communists on the island, had been planned from the start.
Mhm.
Um, Again, you just kind of got lucky or unlucky with that kind of line.
It was so good. I tell you what though, because it added like another layer of like isolation as well. So like obviously like Robin's character is like we're on an island, like the communists are on the island. We need to how the hell do we get off the island? And obviously like spurred us on to like be like right, we've got to get off the island. And as soon as obviously the people that were going to betray us, who were communists, were like, oh, I have a way off the island. It's like, of course I'm going to take a way off the island type thing. It was really good.
It was so good. It's the fact that I was like, okay, this is amazing. And like the people that I trusted the most were the baddies. I was like, amazing. great, never trusting a maid again in my life. Amazing. Yeah, she got me. It was when we were standing there, so when we were at like the bit where so you had just come up and compelled his character to go off and do something. And I was like, right, okay. So he ain't coming back anytime soon. And then it was more because like Mark was there, like, and he was really intensely like the way he was role playing to get me off. I just clicked. I went, "Oh, you bastard! Oh, I know what you're doing."
Yeah.
I was like, "But no, this makes sense. I trust you. Somehow I trust you. Let's go for this." And it was when we were walking off, and then we walked around towards the crew tent, and I went, "Oh God, it's happening now." We're walking towards the crew tent. that was incredible. There was some intense role play there as well. Like, I guess that's something to tick off because I got to be kidnapped. Like that's never happened before. That was quite intense. And then like all the role play from the crew was just amazing.
Yeah. So that was when I was compelled to go see the witches, and then obviously then I came back, and I was like, well, I know out of character that they're somewhere. They've not left the game left the game. But in character, I just assumed that they got off the island. So I just carried on as if they had got off the island. So I'm like, and I actually did forget. I was like, well, they're gonna show up somewhere at some point. And then obviously when we went off to go get the communists, yeah, I was out of character and in character shocked to see like Robyn's character there, and Mark's character there, who somehow managed to play possum because I just saw that them on the ground, went to Yolanda, and then Mark's character stood up and shot me. Just like bastard.
No, it was
That
amazing.
No, I had a chat with those people beforehand and was like, hey, look, you could. I gave them an option because it was like obviously they had to be privy to some of the plots, but they didn't know exactly what they were doing. So they had like dossiers that were given to them that were like, cool, this is your cover profile, this is what you're looking to do on the island, and throughout the day they would be given more and more information what they'd be getting. I was terrified that it was being caught on like the Friday night. Uh, but they did a really good job of sort of leading in, and I didn't expect them to get that far with it, to be honest with you. But they did. They pulled it off, which is great.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
kept it
well done
going.
them.
Yeah, they kept it going as well. Literally, the maid was still in the camp like on late on Saturday, and it took people a lot of thing is we were kind of our characters were a bit more dejected at that point, so we were just like, look, we're not getting off the island, we're probably gonna die, you know. And yeah, it wasn't until other people started asking questions, and then they made a beeline for us, you know, or you know, to Yolanda, because we had said from the start like, yeah, like she's a communist. So that storyline went on for a long time, right?
Yeah, like so late. Like I got to the point where I was like, right, okay, I have lost my marbles, regained them, lost them, gained them again somehow. I've like gone through this whole arc, and I'm now just sitting there, like with a gun in my hand and a drink in the other hand, and just like so disconnected from it. And they came up, and I'm just like, go look in her bag. This is a symbol you're looking for. It'll be there. And then they all went and did it. They went, oh, she is a communist. Like, I know. I know. Like talking with the gun the whole time. Like, yeah, I know. Like I go to this point where it's like I've survived so much shit at this point, just and yeah, and then they did all of that with her, which I heard was pretty horrific. No, it was just yeah, and then oh, also the attack where like everyone pretty much died.
That was after
Yeah.
the cutscene, right? Where we were all
That was after, yeah, that was directly after the
Mhm.
cutscene when
Yeah.
we all like
That was pretty horrifying,
get off me,
actually.
get off me, get off me.
Yeah, again, that was there's a little bit of crosswires from sort of briefing with the crew. So I had kind of predicted that players would, once receiving this, they'd run to safety, which was the town. So what I wanted to do was make sure that people couldn't get back into the town. The issue is that players got into the town very successfully and refused to leave which turned into a bit of a murder ground, a little bit too full on. Again, I had to do some tweaking there a little bit on the fly,
Yeah.
to make it sort of feel
Mm.
worthwhile. But yeah, that was again very intense moment. I think that's probably where the LARP got the most intense, is the most real for people, real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was when you dropped us off, like when we went back in, and you dropped us off in the middle of the that was the most I felt like in a like this is a proper horror, because like our own, like you say, our only place of safety was something we couldn't get back to. So it was like, we would walk up to the town. We were like walking up to the town, and obviously you could see the monsters like patrolling the town, and you were like, crap, we can't get in, where, and it was like that way. We were just like, where do we go? What do we do? Do we?
Yeah, when you like dropped us off, I remember like you walking away and I was like, come back, Max. I don't know where we are. Oh no, that was intense. It was just so happened that we ended up like, we're just the two of us, and we're like, okay, well, what do we do? And we're like crawling through the woods, and we hear voices, and it's like, but you don't want to say anything because like they could be, fish people.
I
So
thought we were
we're
gonna be
like,
shot. I honestly did. When they,
oh,
yeah, I
and
thought
then it
we're
was
gonna.
just like two groups of friends just walking into each other. Don't shoot,
Oh,
friends.
it was a Scooby Doo moment. It was like one of those like, it's okay, we're friends, we're friends. So luckily they didn't just shoot us as we came running up to them.
I remember like being out, like we like then we're following people who like out of character know Eversley because we don't, and so we're like following them around. Then we got lost.
I was just to say, did they though? Because we kind of got
And
lost.
I was like, oh, my gun's stuck, and I'm still so used to using it. Like I gave it to Jay, and I was like, can you fix this? Because like they're nearby, and I can't fix it. And he went, yeah, sure, okay, really quietly, bang. Okay, did that wrong. We're all just like, shit, they're gonna hear us. Oh, but we got back to town.
It's fine, yeah. How did the classes work out for you? Because like I know there was that it definitely gave us all a very different experience. It seemed, because what I thought I was going to be doing as a socialite, I honestly thought we were going to be like the first to die. We were the hardest ones to kill because we were always running away from danger. Is that what you kind
Yeah.
of expected?
To be honest, I didn't quite know how it would play out, and I think if I gave the game to 55 other people to play, I think it would be a completely different story again on that sort of side of things. I think again, like the classes were very nebulous in their sort of design anyway. It didn't sort of prevent you from doing anything. I don't think
No.
there was anything that was like this is for the researchers only, and you can't come here. Like
Yeah.
I think it was made like people took it away that if you wanted to get stuck into something, even if you were in that class, no one's going to say no to you at that sort of stage. But it is something that, spoilers, I'm looking into sort of redefining for the next game. I don't think because there was an issue, I think we might just, the time period is going to be different. The play
Tweak it.
style and what we want out of it, we're going to be doing some tweaks there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah. Do you want to talk, because we're almost coming up to time? Do you want to, because you've released what you're kind of looking to do for the next one, right? Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I could talk a bit about that.
Uh,
So we're looking to do Eldritch Isle 2, which is kind of a continuation of the story, kind of not. It's going to be, I can't give too much away here, but the game will be taking place in sort of the Black Death time period. So
Ooh.
sort of mid-medieval time. The island has appeared off the coast of the Vatican, and the Pope has assembled a task force to have a look and investigate on this island to see what's going on. So you'll be taking place as one of those players to go and investigate that island. So the premise is a little bit different. So this time there's a bit of that structure that I was telling you about. So you imagine the lord who's in charge of this expedition. They give you an order that, if you're going to be playing a serf, high chances are that you're not going to argue. You're just going to go, yes, cool, I'll do
Yeah.
that. Let's get going on. There's also that you kind of expect something scary to happen. Your characters have found or heard of this mystical island that's appeared off the coast. So there's a bit going on there. But there's a lot more that we can play around with both the history and sort of that religious side, and your characters are probably going to be a lot more ignorant to the wider world as well. So there's a lot of cool things that we can play upon.
Yeah, I'm excited for trying to get on that game. It's gonna be good. Did you find that one thing that I think was a a really good idea for this game, but I can see there being it being difficult, was the fact that you ended it in like the middle of the night, so you
Mhm.
had to like because of, like, saying this as someone who was like waning at the end of that game, like I was really tired. Like, I mean, and there was a few of us, I think, like second to last like load of encounters that were going on. I think there were about 6 or 7 of us that just like stayed in town and just chilled, because we were just like, an out of character. We were like, hey, I'm done. So I was just like, my character's going to be sit here and just dejected and be like, I'm going to accept my fate, you know. But also, like, your finale, when you had it like, yeah, like in the dead of night, and we did the ritual and things like that. I think having the horror story wrap up in the middle of the night was like, it wouldn't have hit the same if you'd finished it on the Sunday.
Yeah, I think, it it's hard to do horror when you can see how sort of everyone pulling the strings.
Yeah.
Like at that final finale, I think a part of me is sort of understands maybe 3 in the morning is probably a bit late for some people. Um, I I'm thinking about how we do that in the future, but
Yeah.
both crew and players were shattered at that stage, as you can see.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what you probably didn't realize is that we still had about 25 extra crew members ready to go at the end, still in the woods, because you couldn't see into the tree lines come the end. We put one big sort of floodlight on, and that's pretty much all you could see there.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it was the way to go, is to end it in the night, because otherwise
Hmm.
you go to your typical sort of Sunday that you have a big battle which isn't really horror inspired, right? You want, like, the less you see, the more it terrifies you, and three
Yeah.
o'clock in the morning, pretty scary.
Yeah, and you
It
want that
was
ambiguous kind of
terrifying.
ending as well, right? You want
Yeah,
that kind of like, oh, yeah, they got it, they did it, but did they, type thing.
yeah.
I think there was only a couple of moments where I was actually a little bit where I was properly freaked out. I'm sure Robyn wants to talk about her encounter, but like, that I was actually really freaked out. I was having bleed at that finale, because I knew out of character as well, but definitely in character as well. So when we were deciding, right, okay, there's a sacrifice that has to be made, right? The people that were talking about the sacrifice in the camp like changed their tune. They were like, oh no, we don't need to, like, it needs to be a willing sacrifice. And I'm like, bullshit. And they kept like bringing more people onto, like, into their little huddle, right? And I was like, and I then obviously then we had like two groups, so I'm like going around to people being like, yeah, I think that they're going to sacrifice one of us, you know what I mean? So just keep on your toes, type thing. So I was ready, but I was like, we don't have any other choice. We got to do this ritual. So we're all down there, and obviously then, like, Cthulhu's there.
Mhm.
We're starting to get attacked, and I'm looking at them being like, right, we need to do the ritual. Nothing's happening, and I know in character and out of character why nothing's happening is because they need to sacrifice someone. So I just and I'm like in the corner. I'm like, I can't. So I'm trying to look. I'm speaking to the people that I made allies with, like Yolanda, and there's things coming out of the woods, and I'm like, I'm trying to concentrate on what's going on in the woods, but behind me, I know they're going to grab someone soon. So I'm like, oh, like this, and there's a moment where they do start grabbing people, and someone shoots someone, and I think it was like L, like ran, like probably ran at
Oh
me,
my
and I'm like, my
gosh.
gun was like, I'm like, ah, get it. I managed to just shoot L, and then I realized that I'm next to the people that they're grabbing, and then I'm looking at like Yolanda. I'm like, well, if they grab me or Yolanda, I'm going to be shooting them as well, you know. So yeah, I got a little bit like, oh my god, and then they obviously they grabbed the person who they did end up sacrificing, and that was quite horrific. And I was like, oh my,
Oh, Bella the sacrifice, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, and I was like,
Oh, it was
but
horrible.
my my peak, oh my god, I'm freaking out, was actually just as the game ended. They went time out, and I'm like, oh. So,
You almost gave him an actual heart attack, but apart from that, it was brilliant, Max.
Hey, I think that's a good sign. That's a win from me.
was really cool as well is your radio system that you had up and running, like the radio playing throughout it all,
Oh yeah.
and the speakers throughout everything. That was brilliant. Like it really did like make you feel like you were actually there. And it was like every so often we started listening to what they were saying, and you're like, oh, this is really well done.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you did a fair bit of design with that, because, or whoever did it, because like it started out all just like, oh, this is all just like music, and then like like late Saturday night it was very like the music was very like BioShocky, and just a little bit unnerving, not quite horror-y, but just a little bit like unnerving and apt to the setting.
Yeah, I have to really thank Abby, my partner, for that,
Mm.
because she did a lot of work in sort of the looking into sort of the audio and stuff like that, and doing a lot with the recordings. The week up to the LARP was just a nightmare. That's something I know to prepare for a little bit better. But as I was going to bed, Abby was cracking on with the recordings with her and my
Mm.
mate James, and they were doing a lot of good jobs on that sort of side of things. But you know, in LARP, in LARP, not in LARP, in horror,
Mm.
audio is a key aspect of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you, if you get a scare without an audio sort of along accompaniment with it, it tends to not hit just as hard. So yeah, I was like, cool. So I think a couple of weeks beforehand, I had basically gone up, installed the speaker system around Eversley, and sort of it's there forever now. But yeah, it's hopefully some other games will sort of jump on the back of it. But yeah, it's definitely something to sort of build that atmosphere as well in that town.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's something I didn't realize
Yeah.
that you'd literally gone and installed all of that as well.
Yeah.
Like that made such a big difference. And yeah, like the talk show with them all on. And I was going to say, was that Abby's voice that we're hearing through there as well? Like that's just, it was just so well done. It was like towards the midday, I think we'll come up to lunchtime. That's when we really started noticing certain things getting said. And he mentioned like my character's name and stuff on there and things. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, we couldn't do that with just without, like, I think, one of the things we wanted is that immersion, he said, is that core pillar. So once you're playing a character, you kind of forget that character lives outside of that weekend. So we wanted to make sure that we could bring in those elements and sort of make, you're supposed to be a socialite, you're supposed to be a larger than life character that's known out there. Let's bring that in. Let's bring those facts in. People would want to know what's happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, exactly.
How did you, like, honestly, the I think one of my favorite characters was, like, favorite NPCs was Vanderbilt. I think just having just
Oh, I
the
love them.
I think the brief you gave him was perfect, because it was just, especially playing the socialite as well. Like, there was many moments where we were just kind of hanging around him, and we were just like, "What?" Like, and he's like, "Everything's fine. I'm sure everything's fine." And we're just like, "What is it? Okay, you know." And that is one thing that that stopped a lot of us being like, "Let's get out of here straight away," type thing, you know.
Yeah, we needed that sort of core piece in there. Like, that character played out so well. Alex was a little bit of a last minute casting on it,
Mm.
but I think he did a great job. This was the first time he's ever been in an NPC role, and he really took it and owned it around it for what
Yeah.
it's worth. So I knew on Friday night that we had to set him up to be a bit of a villain, because people instantly thought, you know, you see, you see the big presence on the island, you go, that's the villain, that's the bad guy, that's who we need to sort of team up against, and that definitely did happen. I heard conversations around that. And then the more it played out, the more it came to the case that they were just a clueless idiot on there that didn't quite know what was going on.
Yep.
So there's some cool things. I'm not sure if did either of you get invited to the secret society.
No.
Okay, that'll be.
No, I think no, I think no, I think we heard about it. Yeah, we I think we got involved. What did we get involved with? We didn't get involved with much of
Oh,
the.
'cause we got told a lot about the secret
Yeah.
society from a few people, but we got involved with the King in Yellow,
Yes. Yes.
obviously.
So
That
yeah,
was that
there's
was fun.
quite a lot of like plot threads, and a lot of
Mm.
them haven't tied up yet either.
Ooh.
So that's the fun thing with this game, is that a lot of the knowledge is transferable between games. So like your characters might not know anything, but you might go, "Oh, cool, that's
Ooh.
something that I know about going
Yeah.
forward, or that's something that's happened, or maybe
Yeah.
it does affect your character in some way because of tangents." So one of the things I definitely want for the next game is that you ideally players will be playing ancestors of their previous character. So it's and then stuff that happened in that story will affect potentially how that character plays out as well.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, that's
So
yeah,
excited.
that's really cool. I just want to touch on one thing before we wrap it, and that's the like the actual like safe, like player safety aspect when it comes to like running a horror thing. Like what I'm it's probably better coming from, because I feel like I know kind of what you did, but it's probably better coming from you. Like what process did you go through? Because you pretty much you're trying to make people uncomfortable, but at the same time you don't want to make them uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
how did you get around that?
So there's several different sort of ways that we went to approach that. So first of all was when you signed up and made your characters, we had sort of a questionnaire. It was like, what are your phobias? Are you comfortable exploring your phobias essentially on that? Which kind of gave us a gauge of what to and to not do with players. Obviously, we couldn't go around individually on the day. Some people went on encounters that would engage those phobias, which we didn't say, but we kind of gave enough hints to do that. We also sort of built on sort of those systems. We had, I can't remember what the cool is off the top of my head, but we had a cool and a heightened signal. Either would work. Essentially, it was like, cool, I'm out of here. I don't want
Yeah,
to engage in this, and people would stop, which I think was critical, especially when we went into lines of sort of like the encounter tent stuff and stuff like that. Like those were quite intense role play environments, so having those calls were sort of paramount there. Lastly, we sort of set up sort of two spaces in that game, which was kind of safe spaces essentially, like for people to go down to retreat if they didn't want to
yeah,
engage in that game or just needed a breather and stuff like that. We also had a couple of sort of mental first aiders on site that could help in case anyone did get too intense for people, so they could sort of support them and sort of make sure they were comfortable going forward.
yeah, yeah. No, because the thing is, I'm not. I like horror aspects in my fantasy, and to be honest, like one of the things that drew me to this game, what is it? Was Eldritch horror? Because I'm not into like slasher horror. I'm not into like zombie horror. Really, it's just not what I'm into. But Robin, on the other hand, loves all that stuff. So like Robin's like really loves horror, and as soon as we got into LARP, Robin's like, I want to do a horror one. And it's funny, just as time went on, like we booked the tickets and we had our characters, and then like the week before, I'm just like, right, I'm gonna have a look. How am I gonna play this character? Obviously, get my kit sorted out and everything like that. And it wasn't until we're like literally like driving down when we arrived, Robin, right? I was just like, oh shit, this is a horror LARP.
He blamed me as well the whole way there. He's
I
like,
was like,
cannot believe you've made me come to this. I'm like, whoa. No, it was that's the thing. Like, I was there was parts of me that I was like, gosh, I love horror. What if this properly terrifies me? I don't want to do it anymore. Like, what if it does that? But it was because I got to do one of the cool encounter tents, which I must admit, I felt more safe there going into that than anywhere else because the people that were running it were so good at just being like, hey, this is what's going to happen. If you want to stop, do this. You know, we've got you. We're all friends. This is all great. Okay. Let's just pop this straight jacket on you. Or you're going to lie down. You're going to shut your eyes. Okay. And then I was in a coffin. Like, it was very lovely up until that point.
Yeah, I think it's paramount as safety first, right?
yeah,
It's a hobby that we all like, and people have
mm,
different sort of limits to what they want to explore and what they want
yeah,
to they're comfortable being with, right?
yeah. Did you draw like inspiration from other LARPs when it came to like designing those encounters and that, or were you just like, so because I don't think I've ever, because there can't be that many around. That's what I mean. It can't be that many around, right? Like a video game, is seen by and played by lots of people, right? So you kind of go, right, okay, this is a reaction that someone playing a computer game gets when we put this in a horror game. But I imagine in LARP, you're just like, there isn't really much kind of inspiration to draw from, right?
No, it's a lot of the, especially the encounter tent stuff was kind of Esme had a huge influence on that, and they did a really good job of sort of pulling that. And I know they've been to a lot more LARP systems than myself, but a lot of that came from a little bit of Esme's twisted mind when it came to sort of working those bits out and those kind of horror experiences. It's definitely
Yeah.
something we'd like to sort of explore more and sort of pay off. Like some things I think work better than others, definitely. But yeah, I think building off of that, it's only more areas to explore, right? It'd be interesting to work out what we're going to have in sort of a more medieval themed horror encounters, right?
Robyn,
I'm so excited. Like, I must admit, I am very glad that I didn't put down spiders and say, yeah, I want to explore this, because I feel like that would have been horrific. I wouldn't have been able to do it. But there's a little part of me that's like, you know what, if I get this opportunity again, maybe I should try and explore that one just to see how long it can last.
Yeah, it was very hard trying to work out what we could do for some of the things. Like drowning was a common fear that was put down that
really?
people wanted to explore. It's like, it's very hard to do that in a safe place, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I've had talks with people down at the pub about how we could do it, and there's always the funny how we could try doing X, Y, or Z, and it's like none of this makes sense. Like, how are you going to achieve this, right? I think as well, it's also an opportunity to like really explore concepts quickly, right?
Mm.
To that sort of side. So probably some of the things that we discovered from doing in the first game will probably make its way more into the mainline plot than from those sort of like, that horror tent stuff.
yeah. No, because I think I put down like one of my fears, like it's like deep water, but it's that like feeling when you're like you can't see like below the water and you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. You did that like burying alive thing for me, and it definitely did emulate that. And it's like, oh wow, this is terrifying.
Yeah. But Robyn's
the
definitely one of
rat
those.
scratching on the
Yeah.
side was just great bonus. Well done.
Yeah, Robyn's definitely one of those like type 2 fun type players. Like Robyn will like look like she's absolutely traumatized in some LARP situations, and then be like, "This happened. Oh, you would have hated it." And then obviously after that, she like describes it in like utter glee. Like, this happened to me. It was so awesome.
Yeah, because they opened up the coffin. They were like, it was the next morning at breakfast, and they're like, you were just giggling, like hysterically giggling, and we thought we'd actually broken you. We thought, wow, we've done it. We've properly broken someone at this point. I was like, I don't know how to react. I mean, at that point. No, that was just, it's definitely like one of my favorite LARP experiences. Yeah, and we are going to be sitting in the waiting list for the next one to come out and everything, because yeah, that was amazing.
Well, it's good to know I've at least got 2 tickets sold.
2 tickets.
Yeah.
2 sold. Right, Max. It's been awesome. Just before we wrap up, is there anything you want to? I know you've already shouted out your LARP next year, but anything else you want to shout out? Anywhere you want to point people to? Any socials you want to plug?
If anyone does want to follow and see what wacky stuff that I'm making or sort of stuff for LARP, they can look at my Instagram, which is LARPmax. They can follow me on there. I don't really do much other stuff on that, so just keep your eyes, I would say, pieces peeled for when the rule books drop, probably January next year, I'd say.
Oh, amazing. Cool. I'll put all that in the description. I'll put it in the show notes for the audio as well. Excellent. Thank you very much, Max, for coming on. This has been great. I think a lot of people, you know what, we do actually get a lot of people from different countries that don't have a big LARP like community that just kind of go, I would love to LARP. There's no LARP going on. How do I what's it like to run one? So I think a lot of people will find this kind of thing interesting as well. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, and we'll say goodbye to the podcast, everyone. Right, see you later.
Cheers, see you.
Bye. Thank you very much for stopping by. If you enjoyed this show, make sure you let us know down in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. I've put Max's socials and the links to Max's next game in the description and the show notes as well. Until the next time, though, we love you very much and stay safe.